Statehood now! What do you want?
Freedom.
Statehood now! Free DC! Statehood now! Free DC! Statehood now! Very well! Statehood!
This song is called Stand Up for DC. Woo! Woo! Hey. Here we go. Stand up for DC, stand up. Stand up for DC, stand up. People of the world, rise up. Stand up for your rights. Stand up for DC, stand up. Stand up for DC, stand up. Come on, DC, get on up. Stand up for your rights. We got heavy taxation without representation. We got Congress folks up there without a vote. Well, and if you feel like me, you just wanna be free. It's time for us to join the revolution. Come on, stand up for DC, stand up. Stand up for DC, stand up. People of the world, rise up. Stand up for your rights. Stand up for DC, stand up. Stand up for DC, stand up. Come on, DC, get on up. Stand up for your rights. It's time for our nation to acknowledge our participation in a little thing they call democracy. Democracy. Home rule was cool, but man, ain't no food. I need control of my own destiny. Yeah, stand up for DC, stand up. Stand up for DC, stand up. People of the world, rise up. Stand up for your rights. Stand up for DC, stand up. Stand up for DC, stand up. Come on, DC, get on up. Come on, stand up for your rights.
Brown, and I am a senator from the future state of New Columbia. 5 decades ago, behind where we now stand, and in front of the entire world, Dr. Martin Luther King set forth his challenge to America. He said he had come to cash a check, a promissory note drawn on the bank of justice and secured by the Declaration of Independence and Constitution. But today, standing here on ground consecrated by the sacrifice of Washingtonians who died for our freedom, we are still not free. It behooves us not to commemorate this day if we forget its purpose. As long as one of us is chained, none of us is free. The dream will never be fully realized until we all have the courage to dare to dream it. Dr. King admonished us not to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism, but to seize the fierce urgency of now. Let me make this very clear. Half measures will never make us equal, and half-hearted efforts will never set us free. Only statehood makes us whole. Only statehood makes us equal. Only statehood rights the historic wrong which has stood for far too long in opposition to every principle Americans hold dear. This is our time. The fierce urgency of now speaks to us to gain equality by passing the statehood bills which are now in both houses of Congress. To this end, we must not falter. We must recommit ourselves to the noble struggle for equality and finally fulfill the promise of democracy for the 632,000 loyal citizens of the District of Columbia. Let those who gather on this sacred ground in the future understand that we once stood here and took a vow to change the world, a vow to finish the work to which we pay homage here today, a vow to complete the journey and fulfill the dream, a vow to make the District of Columbia the 51st state and proudly proclaim to the world, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, the people of our nation's capital are finally free at last. Statehood now. My colleague, Senator Paul Scott.
It's an honor and a privilege to be here today on behalf of the residents of the District of Columbia. We stand here at this consecrated memorial dedicated to the memory of Washington, D.C. residents who were taken and died for this country in a war of violence. A war that supposedly was fought to end all wars, but yet this wall continues to be dotted with memorials to those who died in war after war after war. But we stand here today not to commemorate an act of violence, but to remember the stirring words of a warrior of peace, someone who understood that the power and forces of love were greater than the power and forces of violence. We stand here as American citizens, recommitting ourselves to the ideas that were spoken near this site almost 50 years ago, that all Americans deserve equal rights, that one day every citizen needs to be judged by the content of their character and not any other reason. We have a lot to be proud of. We have made much progress. We stood on this mall and watched us inaugurate the first African-American president. But we have to remember that as proud as that moment was in our country's history, that the day we swore him in, the United States Senate once became, again, for too many times, an all-white institution. We have a lot to do. We have to rededicate ourselves to the ideas that were spoken 50 years ago today, because the dream of America won't be realized until all Americans get to live it. And that won't happen until the District of Columbia takes its place as the 51st state of our union. What do we want? Statehood! When do we want it? Now! 50 years has been too long. 200 years has been too long. Let's not let it go any longer. Statehood now! I'm proud to introduce a young man who continues to amaze me with his energy and effort, our United States Representative Nate Bennett Fleming.
All right. Are we at a rally? All right, I want to hear you. When I say free DC, I want you guys to say statehood now. Free DC!
Statehood now!
Free DC!
Statehood now!
All right, so we're here to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. But we're also here to say that the fight for jobs and freedom is a continuous struggle. Is the fight for jobs and freedom over, DC? No! All right, because we're on the front lines of that fight here in Washington, D.C., because we don't have a vote. We don't have democracy. We don't have full representation. And that's something that we have to change. I'm reminded by the words of Dr. Martin Luther King. He said that change doesn't roll in on the wheels of inevitability, but it comes only through continuous struggle. So are you guys ready to struggle, DC? Yeah. Are you guys ready to agitate? Yeah. Are you guys ready to agitate? Yeah. Well, let me tell you a little something about agitation. Raise your hand if you ever used a washing machine before. If you ever used a washing machine before. Well, sometimes if you have a stain that's a little bit too deep, if you have a stain that's a little bit too entrenched, you can't just put a little detergent on it and wash it in the sink. You gotta use a washing machine, because a washing machine has an agitator in it. And the agitator is what shakes it up. It's what shakes it up and gets the stain out. So what we need are agitators. We need people that are gonna fight and continue this march for DC, continue this march for freedom. So before I sit down, I got one last thing to say. In a relay race, the hardest part isn't running the race. The hardest part is passing the baton. So the baton is being passed to you today. The baton is being passed from Dr. Martin Luther King to us, the citizens of DC. So let's renew this fight. Let's fight for justice, freedom, equality, democracy, and let's make DC the 51st state. Free DC!
My name is Anise Jenkins. I'm Executive Director of Stand Up for Democracy in D.C., otherwise known as Free D.C.
Free DC!
D.C. came up from Mississippi with the Civil Rights Movement with Marion Barry and Dr. James Foreman. They left Mississippi to come up here where the dogs were biting, where people were being beat, where people were struggling for their freedom, and they realized that D.C. needed to be free also.
Free DC!
We don't want kibbles and bits, we want statehood.
Free DC!
Free D.C.
Free DC!
Statehood now. Free D.C. Statehood now. What do you want? When do you want it? What do you want? When do you want it? What do we want? When do we want it? Free D.C. now.
Good morning, DC.
Good morning!
So happy to be here with you all today. My name is Angela Rye. I have the great privilege of serving as your mistress of ceremonies this morning. At this time, we're going to move this right along. I have the privilege of introducing to you all someone who's like a big brother. I call him Big Bro Roro. And he is here this morning, Roland Martin from Washington Watch. I'm sure you all have heard him on Tom Joyner. You all may know that he has a new 5-day program coming to us on TV One every single day, weekday, for 3 hours. Roland Martin is going to come up at this time and address DC. Welcome Roland with me, everybody.
So how we doing? I am not going to be long. I don't believe in standing here all day. We have another march to get to. But we did want to say a few words. And the real question should be, what's next? It is always great to gather and to rally, but I believe in order to get statehood, there must be fundamental pressure that is brought to bear on this Congress and even on the President to speak publicly in terms of endorsing statehood for the residents in this area. And that means going to Congress and saying,
you are going to drop 5,000 people on the nation's capital every week while Congress is there to meet with all 535 House and Senate members. That means walking in there with the pictures of members of the military from this area who have died in wars and say, who should they come and speak to when it comes to representing them? It means walking in there with the faces of college students from this area and saying, who do they talk to in terms of having a vote in Congress when it comes to getting their loans, when it comes to getting student financial aid. The only way statehood is going to happen is if the people put the kind of pressure on the members of Congress to force them to stand up, to do what's right, to do what's fair, and to do what's just. And I'll say this as well. It is not enough to put the plates of statehood on the presidential limo.
That's right.
What is required is to say, Mr. President, we invested in you with our votes. Now it's time for a return on that investment for you to speak publicly about this issue. And it's not about saying that we are friends. It's not about saying that we have allies, because at the end of the day, if you have no representative, if you have no voice, if you have no vote, then everything else is simply talk. And the time to listen to Congress who keeps saying, keep waiting, no more. Black folks and white folks and others have been saying, no waiting. We're not going to sit here and wait. And so I say, when we leave here beginning on Monday, and when Congress is in session, we organize and mobilize to say, we're going to visit every member, all 535, and look them in the eye and say, I dare you to ask me how the residents in your area have a representative in Congress, but we don't have one. When are you going to stand with us? And for every person in Congress who chooses not to stand with DC, then you say, we're going to come back every week, look you in the eye, and have the same conversation until you get on board for statehood. And when that happens and put that kind of pressure, then they're going to be able to say, we might want to listen, we might want to step up, because those folks are not going away. That's how it's going to happen. Take care and God bless.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, I have the privilege of introducing to you all your mayor, Vincent C. Gray, who's been a longtime public official and a lifelong DC resident, coming to address you about the importance of DC statehood. Mayor Gray.
Good morning, everybody. Isn't it a great day in the District of Columbia? Isn't it a great day here in our city? I want to thank everybody. I want to thank all of the organizers and all the speakers who have come today to be able to participate in this rally, standing with me and standing with 632,000 residents of the District of Columbia to demand justice for all the people who call the nation's capital home. Are we here to demand justice? We're demanding justice because justice is exactly what we are here today to accomplish. We are here just like those who participated in the original March on Washington some 50 years ago. That event was pivotal in the history of the American Civil Rights Movement. It drew 250,000 people together right here on the Mall. People of all racial groups, all faiths, all regions of the country, major political parties, different sexual orientations and genders, and different income and educational backgrounds. People coming together to bring justice to our nation, ladies and gentlemen. Do it together to call for the passage of meaningful civil rights legislation and an immediate end to all forms of racial discrimination in the United States. At that time, I was a young college student at the George Washington University, right here in our city. And I was proud to be able to participate
in the March on Washington. It was absolutely a spine-tingling experience, ladies and gentlemen. Without a doubt, the most memorable speaker that day was the last one. And the last speaker was the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who delivered what I believe is the greatest speech ever delivered. I have a dream, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah! I consider it to be the greatest speech ever because Dr. King successfully appealed to all Americans of all backgrounds to live up to the promises on which this country, on which our country was founded. That all human beings are created equal and that we deserve equal rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Dr. King knew that if African Americans continued to wait patiently, wait to be given the freedom and equality that we were being denied, it would never happen, ladies and gentlemen. It would never happen. In his letter from Birmingham jail, Dr. King himself famously summed it up by quoting British statesman William Gladstone's timeless line, and I quote, "Justice delayed is justice denied." But ladies and gentlemen, justice has been delayed and justice has been denied to the District of Columbia for decades. Think about it. Think about it. Our city is home to more than 632,000 people. More people than the state of Vermont. More people than the state of Wisconsin. But we have no voting representative in our own Congress, ladies and gentlemen. We pay more than $3.5 billion, and we send our sons, we send our daughters off to fight America's wars. Wars authorized by our Congress in which we have no vote. We can't even send our own locally raised dollars. We can't even spend those dollars. We can't even enact our own laws without first getting permission from Congress up the street. And only city in America where the trash doesn't get picked up, where our teachers won't be able to teach, where our groundskeepers won't get paid. All of those things will happen if the federal government shuts down. Is that right, ladies and gentlemen? Is that right? What are we going to do about it? Ladies and gentlemen, it is unjust, it is unfair, and it is unconscionable. And there is no good reason that in the 21st century in America, that 632 residents of the District of Columbia to still lack true democracy and the right to full self-determination. Dr. King himself recognized this fundamental injustice, and he personally, frequently advocated for home rule in the District of Columbia. How many people remember that in 1965, Martin Luther King Jr. led a march from Shaw to the White House in support of democracy for the District of Columbia? In a speech in Lafayette Park, at the end of that march, he said, "Congress has been," and I quote, "derelict in their duties and sacred responsibility to make justice and freedom a reality for all citizens in the District of Columbia," unquote. Well, so much of Dr. King's dream has come to fruition for our country. Sadly, the District of Columbia still languishes without full voting rights, full representation, or full democracy. If Dr. King were here, if he were here today, I believe he'd praise us for showing up. But I also believe that he'd tell us that we need to do more, ladies and gentlemen. We need to do more than simply rally here this morning. I believe he'd tell us we need to yell and scream. But we also need to work, ladies and gentlemen. I believe he'd tell us that We need to better support organizations that advocate for freedom for the District of Columbia. I believe he tells us that every district resident needs to show up for events like this and tell our friends and our families all across this nation and other states about our city's plight. I believe Dr. King will push us to take every opportunity to tell the people of America exactly how unjust our situation is. He would expect us to demand justice, not wait for it. It's time for us to stop asking for what is rightfully ours and start insisting on it. Dr. King would ask us, why is it that we're not more angry? He would ask us, why are we not more outraged? Why do we dutifully repeat those words in the Pledge of Allegiance? Quote, with liberty and justice for all, without recognizing that those commitments apply to all Americans except the 632,000 people who live in the District of Columbia. Why, he would ask, why do you take it? Why is there not more indignation in this city? Why are you so complacent? So, my friends, stand up for democracy and let's stamp out hypocrisy. America can never be the nation of our ideals until it frees the people of its nation's capital right here in the District of Columbia. Ladies and gentlemen, today we march, tomorrow we fight. Thank you very much.
Take a moment to recognize some DC City Council members who are present. We have Council Member Vincent Orange, Council Member David Grasso, Council Member Anita Bond, Council Member Jack Evans, Council Member Muriel Bowser, Council Member Marion Berry. At this time, ladies and gentlemen, I want to take a moment to just reflect upon the march 50 years ago. At that march, there was only one woman who spoke to the audience, addressed the crowd, Daisy Bates. But there were a lot of women behind the scenes that made that happen. One of those women is your own Congresswoman Norton. She's here today to address you all. She's one of my former bosses as the CBC Executive Director when I was there. She served as the first woman chair of the Equal Employment Opportunities Commission, and she's done so much more for DC and the nation. Welcome to the stage, Congresswoman Norton.
Fellow Washingtonians and visitors from the 50 states of the United States, 50 years ago, at the March on Washington, our civil rights protests and demonstrations, yes, and casualties, finally made race and racism the overriding issue in our country. At today's March on Washington, you will not be able to count the many causes and issues that will be represented. Now we are pleased to be host city for America's many causes and issues. We welcome them all, even those with whom we disagree. From our public safety officers to the average DC resident arrayed here, the marchers will find local citizens ready to help, even adding our voices to theirs for their causes. But this morning, we serve notice as the March on Washington 2000 13 begins that we who have fewer rights than almost any who will march today can no longer allow the deliberate disempowerment and denial of our rights to go unnoticed, unnoted, unmentioned, and ignored. No more marches and ignoring DC. We cannot stand back and simply receive and welcome Americans, our friends and allies, who have votes in the House of Representatives, who have 2 senators in the United States Senate, and who have the right to spend their own money without congressional interference. We are asking them this morning to raise their voices for the same rights that they have for the citizens of the District of Columbia. They come to Washington to tell their story. We want them to hear our story. Please, while they are here, hear our story and carry our story back to their states to help enlighten the millions of Americans, even today, who do not know that our residents pay some of the highest taxes to the federal government in the United States of America. That our residents have fought and died in all the nation's wars, including that war that created the United States of America itself. In 2012 years of being the capital of the United States, and yet our local citizens alone remain outside the founders' slogan that sent them to war for the creation of a country where there would be no taxation without representation. And there are so many more of them who will come from the 50 states of this great country today. There are only 618,000 of us who are residents of the nation's capital. It is not too much to ask that while they are in our city, they add their voices to ours, just as we who host their causes have always added our voices to theirs. We must no longer be the city that hosts the marches, but whose denial of our rights are ignored by the marches. Yes, the District of Columbia is the city to come to march for your causes. But do not march around us. Do do not march over us. Today, at the March on Washington 2013, the residents of the District of Columbia ask that you join us so that we too shall overcome. We ask that you join us because ours is only this little light of mine, but we are going to let it shine, and let it shine until the District of Columbia is the 51st state of the United States of America. Free DC!
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time you'll be addressed by Frank Smith, who's a former city councilman and the DC chairman of the mayor's 50th anniversary committee.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to join the mayor of the state of New Columbia, our senator from the state of New Columbia, and all of the various congressmen and representatives here who represent the district. I'm also pleased to chair an outstanding committee which put this whole event together and came out and got all these people out here today. We are going to press forward with our case before that very crowd of 200,000 or 300,000 people out there, make converts out of them, send them back home to their states and their jurisdictions to support statehood in the District of Columbia. And so people ask us, why don't we march? And I say to them, we won't stop marching until every person in the District of Columbia has the right to vote, and has the right to be represented in the Senate and the House. As long as we have to pay our taxes like everybody else, send our children off to war, we have the right to vote in the United States Congress. It is one of the last great issues left in this country, and it's one that we have the power to try to change. So welcome to this great demonstration. Let's go out there and make these people understand our cause and support statehood for the District of Columbia. Thank you very much.
And of course, the councilmember from Ward 8, who was here in 1963, Councilmember Marion Berry. It was said before, but I'm going to say it again. In 1965, Martin Luther King, on a march in the District of Columbia, said, Congress has been derelict in their duties and their sacred responsibility to make justice and freedom a reality for all citizens in the District of Columbia. And later, at another visit in the district, at Addis Israel Synagogue, Martin Luther King urged massive nonviolent direct action in order to call this issue to the conscience of the nation. And that's the challenge that's before us, is how do we stir up this demand for equal rights? You know, we are citizens of the United States of America, and citizens of the United States of America have the right to vote for members of Congress, members of the House of Representatives, members of the Senate of the United States. They have the right in each state to enact and to amend and to repeal their own laws. They have the right to adopt their own budget and spend the money they want to. But we, citizens of the United States of America, do not have that right. We demand the same right that every citizen of the United States has. But the March on Washington was more than just about freedom. It was more than just about ending racism, which we have yet to fully achieve in our society. It was about justice. It was about economic equality. And it was about jobs. And we continue to struggle with these issues today. We have a long way to go, both nationally and locally. We are struggling in the district with a living wage bill, a bill that says not just jobs, but good jobs. A bill that says poverty jobs aren't good enough. We want living wage jobs. A bill that says put an end to the working poor. But these issues are not easy. They're not easy nationally, they're not easy in the District of Columbia. Martin Luther King died in Memphis fighting for decent wages for sanitation workers. It is fitting that we are having this rally for statehood at this memorial, the D.C. Memorial on the Mall. A memorial that honors those from the District of Columbia who gave their lives fighting in wars abroad. Wars that the Congress of the United States can declare, but we cannot elect members to the Congress. It is time that we ramp up the fight for statehood, that we ramp up the fight for equality. We hold this statehood rally on the day of the march because we know that the issues of civil rights, statehood, and economic justice cannot be divorced, but are intertwined. What do we want? Statehood. When do we want it?